You survived the entire winter. The pipes didn't burst, the power stayed on, the heating held. You made it through every storm, every freeze, every night that dropped below zero and tried to take something from you. And now, it's March. The temperature is climbing, the snow is melting. Everything outside looks like it's finally recovering. That's exactly when it gets you. Because the most dangerous flood you will ever face doesn't come from rain. It doesn't come from a hurricane you can track on your phone for 5 days before it arrives. It comes from 3 months of accumulated snow, releasing everything at once. Quietly, invisibly, from hills and fields and watersheds you've never visited, and it reaches your door while you're sleeping, convinced the worst is already over. The people who die in spring floods didn't ignore the danger. They thought the hard part was behind them. Here's what makes snowmelt flooding different from every other flood you've been warned about. Rain floods have a trigger you can see. The storm comes, the sky tells you something is wrong. Your phone buzzes with warnings. The threat is visible before it's dangerous, and you have hours, sometimes days, to make decisions. Snowmelt doesn't give you that. The trigger happened in November. Every inch of snow that accumulated on every hill and field and mountain within 50 miles of your home is stored water, frozen, motionless, silent. It has been building all winter like a debt you forgot you owed. Then 1 week in March, the temperature climbs 10 degrees above normal and stays there. And the snow doesn't melt gradually, it releases everything at once. Billions of gallons of water that were locked in ice for months start moving simultaneously, feeding into streams that feed into rivers that were already running high from last week's partial thaw. The river doesn't flood because it rained. The river floods because the entire winter just called in its debt. By the time water is visible at the edges of your property, it has already been rising for hours upstream. The flood that reaches your door at 2 in the morning started moving at noon the previous day, 30 miles away, in a valley you've never seen. You went to sleep with dry ground outside. You wake up with water in your hallway. That's not a dramatic exaggeration. That's the incident report from spring thaw events across the northern United States and Canada, repeated every single year. In communities where people knew flooding was possible and still got caught because the water moved faster than anything they'd experienced before. And this is where people lose everything, not because they were careless, but because they were watching the wrong thing. Millions of Americans live in spring flood zones and have no idea. Not because the information doesn't exist. FEMA flood maps are free. County emergency management databases are public. Historical flood records are accessible to anyone who looks. But nobody looks until the water is already there. By then, looking doesn't help. And here's what the water actually does when it arrives, because people consistently underestimate this, and the underestimation is what kills them. 6 inches of moving water will knock a child off their feet. 15 centimeters, roughly the distance from your wrist to the middle of your palm, moving at any meaningful speed, will take down a healthy adult. Not inconvenience them, not make them stumble, take them down and carry them. 2 feet of moving water will float your car.
A vehicle that weighs 2 tons becomes completely uncontrollable in 2 feet of fast-moving water, and the people inside have approximately 30 seconds to make a decision before the current takes them somewhere they did not choose to go. Most people spend those 30 seconds convincing themselves it's probably passable. It is not probably passable. Nothing about floodwater is probably fine. That's the operating assumption that gets people found 3 miles downstream. And snowmelt water is not clean. It carries whatever was sitting under 3 months of snow, agricultural runoff, Road chemicals, sewage from overwhelmed systems, everything the thaw dislodged upstream. The contamination isn't a minor inconvenience. It's a documented health threat that persists for days after the water recedes and causes real illness in people who waded through it thinking it was just water. It is not just water. It is 3 months of everything moving. But what actually separates the people who survive spring floods from the people who don't isn't gear, it isn't money, it isn't even location. It's the invisibility window. The flood is already happening before you can see it. Upstream snowmelt begins days before water reaches populated areas. The river is rising right now, somewhere you can't see, in a watershed that drains into your town, your street, your basement. And there is a gap between when the process becomes irreversible and when the water becomes visible at ground level. That gap is your entire window. Miss it and you're reacting to a flood that already decided where it's going. Use it and you're ahead of the water instead of under it. Here's how you use it. First, know your watershed before March. Not during the thaw, before it. A watershed is simply the land area that drains into a specific river or stream near your home. Everything that melts within that watershed eventually reaches your water level, and you can find yours in 15 minutes on FEMA's flood map service or your county emergency management website. What you're looking for: are you in a 100-year floodplain? Are you downstream from significant snowpack? Has your area flooded during spring thaw in the last 20 years? If any answer is yes, you are in the window. You need to know before the water does. 15 minutes, before March. That's the whole task. Most people won't do it because it feels like preparation for something that probably won't happen this year. It probably won't happen this year. It will definitely happen eventually. And when it does, the people who spent 15 minutes in February will have options that the people who didn't spend 15 minutes will not have. Second, monitor upstream, not outside your window. This is where most people get it wrong even when they're trying to do it right. Watching your backyard is not monitoring. By the time your backyard is relevant, the decision window is already closing. The United States Geological Survey runs a network of real-time stream gauges across the country. The website is water.usgs.gov. Free, updates every 15 minutes, covers thousands of points on thousands of rivers. You find the gauge upstream from your location, note the flood stage level, and check it starting the first time temperatures climb above freezing for more than 2 consecutive days in late winter. When the gauge reading starts climbing faster than it did yesterday, not flood stage yet, just accelerating, that's the signal. Not to panic, to start the sequence, because the sequence is everything. And this is exactly where prepared people lose the house.
Not because they didn't have supplies, because they did the right things in the wrong order. The sequence: elevate before you evacuate. If you have any warning at all, the 30 minutes you spend moving things before you leave will save you weeks of recovery after. Electrical panels, water heaters, furnaces in a basement. Turn off the power at the main breaker before water reaches it. Documents, medications, irreplaceable items, top floor, waterproof bags before you take a single step toward the door. Make the list now, in the right order. Put it somewhere you can read it at 2 in the morning when your brain is running on adrenaline and making excellent decisions about everything except priority. Because at 2 in the morning with water coming in, you will grab the television before the birth certificates. You will grab the laptop before the medication.
You will grab everything that feels valuable and leave everything that is irreplaceable. Not because you're irrational, but because adrenaline reorders your priorities in ways that feel completely logical until 3 days later when you're trying to remember where you keep your passport. The list fixes this. Make it now, when you're calm and thinking clearly, and there's no water anywhere near your house. Third, your evacuation route needs to be decided before you need it. Not roughly, specifically. Which road, which direction, which bridge, and which bridge you do not cross under any circumstances once water is rising. Bridges fail in floods without warning. The water under a bridge during a flood event is faster and more violent than anything visible from the road surface. Do not drive through water you cannot see the bottom of. This is not excessive caution. This is the single rule that separates flood survivors from flood statistics. 6 inches of moving water, that's all it takes to lose control of a vehicle. And the road surface under moving water may not exist anymore. Washouts happen invisibly, and you find them when your front wheels drop into nothing at 40 miles per hour. Your route goes to high ground, avoids river crossings where possible, does not go through any area that has flooded before, and floodwater follows the same paths it always has. The road that was underwater in 2019 will be underwater again. Plan around it before you need to. Fourth, your kit needs to be specific to water. The standard emergency kit advice was designed for a generalized emergency. A flood has specific requirements that generic advice doesn't cover, and finding out what you're missing while standing in contaminated water is a bad time to improvise. Waterproof containers for documents and medications, not water-resistant, waterproof. There is a difference, and you will discover it at the worst possible moment if you get it wrong. Battery-powered or hand-crank radio. Cell towers go down in flood events. Your phone becomes a flashlight and a clock. The radio becomes your only connection to road closure information, shelter locations, and emergency management updates. Rubber boots above the knee if possible, above the ankle at minimum. Wading through floodwater in sneakers exposes you to contamination through skin contact. The contamination is real, and the illness that follows is real, and neither of them care that you were only in the water for a few minutes. A whistle, if you are trapped in a vehicle, in a building, on a roof, a whistle carries farther than a voice and requires no battery. It is the cheapest item in the kit. It is the one you most want to have and never need. And the item almost nobody includes, a window punch and seatbelt cutter, kept within reach of the driver's seat.
If your vehicle enters deep water and the doors won't open, which they won't, because water pressure against a submerged door requires more force than most people can generate, you have a narrow window to exit before the vehicle fills. A spring-loaded window punch breaks tempered glass with one strike. Without it, you are hitting a window with your fist in rising water in the dark. That does not work. The punch does. $20. Glove compartment. Done. Now, the thing that kills people who did everything else right. They go back too soon. The flood recedes. The water drops, the ground reappears, and the house is right there, and it looks fine from the outside, and there are things inside they need, and the worst is clearly over. The house is not fine. Floodwater infiltrates wall cavities and stays there. It saturates insulation and subfloor and structural wood, and creates mold conditions within 24 to 48 hours of exposure. A house that flooded 2 days ago and has been closed since is not a house. It is a sealed environment with compromised air quality that will affect your respiratory system within an hour of occupancy. Before re-entering, ventilate first. Open everything. Wait an hour. Wear an N95 at minimum. Do not run HVAC until it's been inspected. A flooded air handler will distribute contaminated air through every room in the house, efficiently and thoroughly, like it was designed to do exactly that, which in a sense it was, just not with that particular air. The electrical system stays off until an electrician inspects it. The outlet looks dry. The switch looks normal. You flip it and discover it wasn't. You do not discover it that way. Check the structure before you trust it. Floodwater undermines foundations. A floor that looks solid may have lost the support beneath it. A wall that looks straight may have shifted. You test before you load, and you do not bring children into a flooded structure until it has been assessed by someone who knows what compromised looks like. It does not always look compromised. That's the point. Spring does not announce what it's carrying. The thaw looks like relief. It looks like the end of something hard. The temperature climbs. The snow retreats, the ground reappears, and everything outside signals that the difficult part is finally finished. Underneath all of that, water is moving, quietly, invisibly, building in watersheds, and river channels, and low-lying fields, carrying the weight of an entire winter, and preparing to release it in the span of days. The people who get caught aren't the ones who ignored the danger. They're the ones who looked at the warm sunshine and decided the hard part was over, who watched the snow melting and felt relief instead of caution, who went to sleep with dry ground outside and didn't check the gauge upstream because everything looked fine from where they were standing. Know your watershed. Check the gauge upstream. Make the list in the right order. Decide the route before you need it. Put the window punch in the glove compartment tonight, not when you're already in moving water wondering why you didn't. And when the gauge starts climbing faster than it did yesterday, don't wait to see if it keeps going. It keeps going. Prepared isn't safe. Present is. Watch this next.